Today's block is that Ayin Bays, and we are up to Ayin Aleph Bays in the very bottom of the page. We wanted to know, we're discussing that even when they went into Eretz Yisrael with Yeshua, that's when they all circumcised themselves. And then we said that they were given the mitzvah of Pri as well, to remove the thin membrane and so on. And then now we want to know, why is it that in the Midbar, so all those who enter the Midbar, they circumcise themselves with the Mitzrayim, but in the Midbar itself, it seems nobody circumcised themselves. In some medrash it says that the tribe of Levi circumcised, but nobody else. So whoever wants to know, the Midbar, 2 lines from the bottom, my time in the Mo, why didn't they circumcise themselves in the Midbar? Gemara gives 2 answers. One answer is because they were traveling a lot, and therefore they were weak and they were vulnerable and they didn't model themselves. Now the truth of the matter is they spent quite a few years, there were 38 years and they traveled very little, but they didn't know every single, it says Api Hashem Yachna, Api Hashem Yisod, that they were just waiting for Hashem to give them instructions. Every morning they woke up to see whether they were going to move or not. They felt very unsettled, and therefore it's as if they were traveling all the time. That's one answer. Another answer is the northerly wind did not blow at that time. The northerly wind in the northern hemisphere is not cold, but it's not hot, and therefore it's it's healing. And without that northerly wind at all, they couldn't go ahead and circumcise themselves or put their lives in danger. The Tanya, we learned all those 40 years the Eden were having their sojourn in the desert. The northerly wind did not blow for them, and therefore it was unhealthy. Why didn't it blow for them? My time, but why? Now the Taish already points out that the northern wind did blow, but it wasn't never on its own. It was always together with another wind, and it helped out, and we need it on its own as well. My time, of why? Is it because they were sort of like treated like outcasts, and therefore it didn't blow for them? Now, why were they Nezufim? What did they do wrong? And very interesting, very fundamental argument here with Rashi and Tosfos. Why were they in the Midbar considered Nezufim? The entire generation was considered Nezufim. Rashi says, I'll just quote you Rashi here. Rashi said that on account of what happened with the Egel. Therefore, they were not really suitable. They didn't deserve to have this northerly wind. And the point is, because the northerly wind did not blow on them, they never had sunlight. And because they never had sunlight, you need the sun to as we had in Chumash, in Parshas Vayishlach, when Yaakov was healed with the sun. They never had the sun, therefore they were never cured. So Rashi says, why were they so punished? Because of the Egel. According to Rashi, the Egel was never totally forgiven for the Bnei Yisrael. And the Tosfos is a very fundamental Tosfos. Tosfos says over here in Zufin Hayom, quoted, what on account of the story of the Meraglim, not the Egel. Why not? But not like Rashi says, Mais Egel. Hashem totally forgave the Yidden for the Egel. But Amalem, said to them, I will forgive you, like we say in Kippur by night. And I'll prove to you, Mishkan, the Eibishter told Moshe Rabbeinu, instructed him to build a Mishkan. And Hashem dwelled there. In other words, Tosfos learns here like the Ramban and Chumash, the Mishkan was never part of the plan. But once the Eden worshipped the Egel Azov, and they did Shuvah, so the Eibishter decided you need a Mishkan there. And the Mishkan was a sign. The Mishkan was a sign that the Eibishter forgave them totally on the Egel Hazov, and that's it. What happened then in the second year was the story of the Meraglim, and that the Eibishter never forgave them. That's Tosfos. And Rashi holds no, the Egel Hazov was never totally forgiven, and the Mishkan was not only done after the Egel Hazov. It was always part of the plan to have a Mishkan, and the Mishkan doesn't in any way prove that the Egel Hazov was totally forgiven. And Rashi in Chumash all the time talks about how Egel Hazov is always, every time there's something wrong, we're worried about the Egel Hazov. And according to Tosfos, we're not worried about the Egel Hazav at all. Or another answer is, the Gemara says, with 5 lines on the top of the page, why didn't the northerly wind blow? Why wasn't the sunlight while they were in the Midbar, so they couldn't go ahead and circumcise themselves? Because they didn't want to blow away to disperse the clouds of glory. Now, true, the whole clouds of glory is a miracle. We could have just added another miracle and said, okay, the clouds of glory are there, but it's not going to disperse when the northerly wind blows. Nevertheless, the Eibishter didn't want to make an extraness for no apparent purpose, or they didn't deserve it. Everybody wants to know, so how come it says in the pasuk that this was a gnus of the Eden, this is an embarrassment for the Eden, that they only brought 1 korban Pesach, which is the second year, and that was it, because all the people who weren't circumcised, they couldn't go ahead and bring korban Pesach. So why is it a gnus? They couldn't circumcise, but they couldn't because they didn't have the sunlight and they didn't have what to do. And we're looking about yesterday that if you don't have a choice, then the not being gemalit does not in any way prevent you from bringing the Korban Pesach. So Taisa brings it interesting that they did bring a Korban Pesach all the years, just it wasn't done 100% correctly because a lot of them weren't circumcised. Anyway, the Gemara continues. A very interesting halach. Amar Papa, here therefore Yemedi with the cloudy day, there was no sunlight. The Yemed, the Shusa, or let's say the southerly wind blows, which is not a good wind, not a healthy therapeutic wind. You don't circumcise on that day, but nor do you extract blood. But today, because everyone does it and most people come out all right, therefore we say, you know what, Hashem's hands, we don't really care. Now, according to some, when we say over here that on a cloudy day you don't have to circumcise, we're talking about if it's Milah Shalei B'Zman, it's not the right time. But if it's Milah B'Zman, the 8th day, you have to go do the mitzvah. But the Ritva clearly learns, very interesting Ritva here. The Ritva learns that if you opt out of circumcising your son because it's a cloudy day, you're allowed to. Then in his wording, he says if it's on Shabbos and it's a cloudy day and it's raining, you're allowed to. Some say you're allowed to not to circumcise. Some say you shouldn't circumcise because you're doing it on Shabbos. And if you learn that Milah on Shabbos is not Hutra, that means Shabbos, you're not allowed to really do it. It's just that the mitzvah Milah overrides Shabbos. But when there's a sakana, you're not allowed to. Actually, you should not circumcise. According to Ritva, he brings some people learn that on a Shabbos, cloudy day, you're not allowed to circumcise your child, even if it's the 8th day. Fascinating. All of the time, 40 years, even when the midbar, is every single day the northerly wind, in the middle of the night. And because we don't circumcise at night, therefore it didn't help with the northerly wind. Or even if it's say Shalei B'Zman, you're allowed to circumcise at night, but you need during the day as well, you need sunlight. As Rashi says, it's not just a question of northerly wind, you need the sunlight. It says, but it was midnight. Hashem is smitten all the firstborns. You see, midnight is very special. My Talmud, how do you learn from there? Kamash teaches the Eis Ratzin will see that when it's a good time, then like midnight is a good time to help out the Eden, kill the other firstborn. It's an important thing, and therefore other things can have good things happen as well. For example, northerly wind. That's why we have Tikka Chatzais, because midnight is a very important thing. And Rashi says that's what happened there. David Melech, remember we had him beating a brachas, had a hot by his bed, and when the wind would change direction, he knew it was midnight, he would get up. And he says, Chatzos Laila Okamani L'hoydef, look, I will wake up midnight to go ahead and pray for Hashem. Amr Rabban Zavuna. A new din now. So we're talking about an oral the whole time. What about somebody who was circumcised, but then he went out of his way and he did something, he pulled the skin back, and according to the Shem, doesn't matter if he did it physically or it happened through some sickness. But what happens Moshuch? You know, we learned in the Pigavas and Moshuch Allah say terrible things. So what happens if it's Moshuch, he went ahead and he undid his bris milah? The question is he treated now as an oral, and therefore he will do well, for example, cannot eat truma, or he's not treated like an oral because he already was circumcised. And the Gemara wants, the bottom line is the Gemara wants to say 3 opinions. One is that Mahatoida, he's an oral. One is that the Huna will learn now Rabbanon, he's an oral. And there's another opinion that that he's not an oral at all, that he's allowed to eat. And interesting, the question maybe is the hinges on Rogat Shabbat, or the Rebbe brings on the Sichas. So that is the mitzvah milah a one-off thing, or is it an ongoing thing? The mitzvah milah is a one-off thing, but you malad yourself already. Who cares what happens tomorrow? But if you learn the mitzvah milah is an ongoing thing, then it doesn't matter 10 years ago you gemalad, but if now you're Moshe Chalasa, right now you're not gemalad anymore. Therefore you're an odl. You know, Mahatayda Midrabanan. So that's the question. So Rabuna says, Dvar Toida, according to the Toida, Moshuch, if you, let's say you went and undid your Mila Oichel Betruma, you're not an odl, the fact is you did your mitzvah. It's only Medibrehem goes through Olav. As the Rebbe explains Rogachover, there's the mitzvah there's the act of the milah, and then there is the fact that a Jew is a circumcised person. The act of milah is a one-off thing. The fact that you are a circumcised person is an ongoing thing. And what the question is, what prevents an oral from eating truma? Is it the fact that he didn't do the act of milah, or is it the fact that right now he's not considered circumcised? And that's the question here. When Yevamos Daf, they decreed in him they should need a oral. And why did they go there? Because he looked like it looks like an oral, because right now he's not a malot anymore, he's not circumcised. Mesa has a question. It says, Moshe Tzorich somebody's Moshe has to go ahead and circumcise themselves. Isn't that clearly it's Mahat Torah that if he wants to eat Truma? Says no, Midrabanan. In fact, look at the language. It says tzaddik he has to. It doesn't say he's usher to eat Truma. He has to mal himself. In fact, what was the question so clear? Tzaddik says tzaddik. Gemara says Ketay would say his mistake was based on the sefer, the continuation of the Bryce, and that is Yehuda says lo yima. Yehuda says no. Once you mal it once and you put the skin back, don't mal yourself a second time. And why not? It's actually dangerous to do it a second time because you have a sharp knife, whatever it is. You might then cut part of the crown itself off, and you might then turn yourself into a krus shavcha, that you cut off part of your male member, and then you're not allowed to marry the kol, and so on. Don't do it. Then said back to him, what happened was when Bar Kochva, Ben Kaziba, his real name was, and what the other one, that Rabbi Kiva called him Bar Kochva because Yaakov, referring to Parshas Vayechi, that one day there'll be a leader coming from Yaakov. Rabbi Kiva was convinced that Bar Kochva was the Mashiach of his time. And Rashi says, interestingly, that Bar Kochva was a king, a Jewish king, for 2.5 years. So what happened was the Roman government put into place a rule that everyone has to undo their bris milah. So everyone had to pull back their membrane. And then when Bar Kochva became the king, and he initially successfully won the battles against the Romans, so what he did was everybody went and maled themselves a second time. Well, he lead a bonus, and they grew, and they raised a whole generation of people. Shenemert says he goes. John did it. Go do it again. Go do it again. So we see that it's not a sakana. But maybe another pasuk, as it says in the pasuk, as brisi hafa, that you go ahead, you cancel my bond. And Lerabba is to teach you that what it is hamoshach, to teach you that somebody who undid it is like he's not circumcised, he has to circumcise again. Why do I need to bring a second pasuk? Maybe that pasuk is referring to you have to get rid of the little strings we learned yesterday that might still hasn't been completely detached. That also has to be redone. That if somebody's a moshach. So he saw what he thought, but the since the shas, interesting that the Gemara calls it shas, when in fact we don't read in the times the Gemara was learning about Kedusha, there were 600 Masechtas. So everybody tries to change the text here. Instead of shas, it should say Talmud or something, not shas. Whatever it is. I see, since they brought a pasuk, so he thought that it's Mahatayda that a Moshuch has to circumcise himself. The loy is wrong with the Rabbanon because it's only a smachta. But so Rabbanon says that a Moshuch Mahatayda is considered Gemalah because the act he did, but with the Rabbanon, because he's not ongoing, according to Rabbanon, therefore with the Rabbanon, that also prevents you from being Truma. Makes a last question. It says in the Bright said the following: a tumtum, so he has a skin growth over it. We cannot tell if he's a male or female. It's definitely one or the other. Cannot tell, and therefore he's uncircumcised. Ain't oichel but truma, cannot eat truma because maybe he's a male and he's an oral because he's not circumcised. But noshav va'avodav, but his wife and his servant can eat. Why could they eat? Because we don't care what he is. If he's a male uncircumcised, we learned before that his wife can eat because he's still a kohen, and if he's a female again. She can eat from her own right. What do you call it? We'll soon talk about tumtum and getting married. We'll soon see how he has wives. So Gemara says, Moshe, what happens if he undid his mila? Overnotion was born circumcised, and he has to have toughest down bris. He has to extract a little blood. He didn't do that yet. Then they can eat. They can eat. And the regin is, if he's born circumcised, it says clearly here that a moshuch can eat truma. And the regin is, if somebody is not the regin is, and the regin is the word itself is broken up into two words, male and female, and he has both signs. So eichel truma, because whatever he is, male or female, both eat truma. Now, truma, he circumcised himself, because if he's uncircumcised, then obviously he cannot eat truma. He's not, so he's circumcised, but we don't know halachically if he's male or a female or a third gender altogether. So already back then we had more than two genders. The ain oichel bekotchim, but kotchim he cannot eat. We're talking about kotchim, like korbachatas if he's a kohen or an asham, because there he says has to be a zochav vade, definitely a male, and he's not. Now, tumtum then says again, repeats again, tumtum, like we said before, doesn't need truma, is more than that. Tumtum eino oichel leibe truma, leibe kotchim. So we have two cases of tumtum in the Raisa. We want to know why it says twice tumtum in the Braisa. Says the Gemara, telling me, let's first analyze the fact that it says, Moshech, if somebody undid his mila or noile kishu mol born mol, had a elo oiflis, clearly you can eat. It's a kasha ravuna, to repudiate ravuna. In fact, that's one version of the Gemara. Rashi brings another version which he prefers. And Rashi's second version of the Gemara is the other way around. From here, the proof to ravuna. That's that what mahatoideth a tumtum can eat. But with the Rabbanan, because it says twice tumtum, the first time Mahatayda, the second time with Rabbanan, a tumtum cannot eat. Exactly what Ravuna said, that Mahatayda, they could eat, but with Rabbanan, they can't. Anyway, let's analyze it. But I said tumtum may not eat truma, but Noshav, his wife, how can a tumtum get married? The avoda and his slave, Noshav, the tumtum and ole, how in the world can he have a wife? Elaim with the cutters that we were talking about just what? Just got engaged. And nothing more than that, and therefore it's a suffix kedushin because maybe he's a male, and therefore the kedushin is kedushin. The time you learn tumtum, you get a kedushin and say about kedushin, but in the end is kaddish. If somebody gave kedushin to a tumtum because maybe he's a female, and therefore it's about kedushin, when do we say that is kedushin only mechumra that he needs to get? But or that tumtum needs to get. But to be lenient and say that what? Let's say he's married and that his wife can eat truma. Me, I'm lenient. Whoever said that? And I remember we learned before that if you're engaged, mahatayda, your wife can eat truma. So I mean, rabbanon, we don't want you. So, but who said that tumtum can give his wife? So how do you have a wife? So I think issue because maybe he's a woman and a woman cannot be mekadosh a woman. I'm going to buy a Bible. You have two answers. The Bai answers b'shebeyav nikaras mebachutz. We're talking about a tumtum where he has a skin graft over his genitalia, but we can see that there's a bayim, a testicle that's sort of outside of this skin, so we can tell definitely he's a male. No, but he never he's an oral because he didn't circumcise themselves. And interesting, bayav b'chutz. Whether you actually, we had a machlekes if you force a tumtum to remove the skin so we can work out what he is or not. But what about it be'ev and b'chutz? Would more to him hold then that you force because you know definitely he's a zocher, and therefore you should go ahead and get circumcised or not. Rava says interestingly that no, we're not talking about be'ev b'chutz. We know definitely a tumtum is a male. We're talking about a tumtum. We have no idea what the gender is. But my nosha. So what do you mean as his wife? It means ima, his mother. Says the Gemara, that he feeds his mother. That if she was married to a kohen, had a son or whatever, a child, a tumtum, the mother can continue eating even after her husband died. Says the Gemara, imay pshita. Why not? She has a child. We learned before we had a mamzer, it doesn't matter. No, I would have thought, I would have thought the criteria is that this child should be able to procreate and continue on. But if the child's a dead end, cannot go any further, then maybe the mother doesn't need either. K'mashalon, that it does. Says the Gemara, Tashma coming here. The Braisa repeats the second time, tumtum. It says twice tumtum there, as if there are two kinds of tumtums. So there are two kinds of tumtums. Remember, one that you have no idea what the gender is. The other one is you do know what the gender is because the bay of the but still tumtum because you haven't removed the skin. The first one talking about where it's definitely an oral, for 100% sure that it's a male just and it wasn't circumcised. So of course it cannot eat truma because 100% needs he's an oral. Uktani Sefer, Safik, and the Sefer is talking about we have no idea what the gender is, but still cannot eat truma because maybe he's a male. So that's a big chiddush. Okay, I understand the two kinds of tumtums. Tumtum which is definitely a zachar, tumtum which is not. According to Rav, tumtum the Sefer lamali. According to Rav, what's the two tumtums? Why repeat again? Simon says my tumtum oral. You know what a tumtum means? A tumtum means that it says in the Sefer when it says tumtum doesn't mean a tumtum means somebody who's uncircumcised. So you might understand. Hash the suffer a mother generation we talk about tumtum, which we don't know might be a male, might be a female, and maybe it's a male and uncircumcised. Can I eat truma? So you can tell me that it's definitely uncircumcised and definitely an oral. You don't eat truma. What's the point? Why? It's totally redundant. Why? Somewhere said you're right. Ma tam cover the Bryce is explaining why is it that a tumtum cannot eat truma. I couldn't make a truma. You know why? There's a suffix oral. Because a suffix in oral. And if an oral doesn't need truma kachim, so show to us, a doesn't need either. In fact, let us say it's a machlekes tanaim, and that is moshuch, and the machlekes tanaim will be whether it's mahatoyro or whether it's midrabanan. Moshuch, if somebody would say undid his mila, the guy if a ger converted when they were circumcised, and so they need to go ahead and do to extract some blood. The cut job is manai, and a child that's beyond past 8 days. Everyone else who needs to be circumcised, lastly, somebody had two membranes, not just one but two, so he has to remove both of them. Ain't in the middle of the game. No matter what the cause is, if you have to circumcise yourself, even just letting blood, it has to be done by day. If it's the 8th day, I agree with you, it has to be done by day. If it's past the 8th day, you can circumcise by day and by night. Interesting, Gemara Kedusha already mentioned, but in Gemara Kedusha, all the Shai talk about, we have a pasuk that a woman does not have the mitzvah bris milah on her child when l'chayda it's a mitzvah asay shahazman grama, right? You can only do it by day. So of course she's exempt. So we answer that Gemara as the Tosfos here says, that Gemara over here, other Hashem, you have different answers. We'll talk about it when we get to Gemara Kedushin. That Gemara there is going according to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar that says that once he passed a day, it is no difference day or night. So Slay is mangrama. Anyways, what's the argument here? One of the items mentioned here is Moshuch, whether it has to be done by day or can be done at Elazar by night. My lab that I said, the first opinion says that Moshuch is Torah, therefore it has to be done by day. Elazar holds that Moshuch is only Rabbanon, therefore it does not have to be done by day, be done by night as well. When the second time. So does that make sense? You're making the difference if it's Ma'atayim and Rabbanon. So tell me the next case. It says that if the child was not circumcised the 8th day, but beyond that, there's still an argument. Everyone agrees that a child, even 10 years old, Ma'atayim has to get circumcised. Otherwise, there's chorus. So nothing to do with, and yet Rabbi Elazar says you can do it at night. Nothing to do with Torah Rabbanon. But Tizbra, Cotton Shabbos Man, Mikol Man the Rabbanon is Rabbanon. El Kuliyam Moshuch the Rabbanon. Everyone agrees that Moshuch is the Rabbanon. The Cotton Shabbos Man the Rice. Everyone agrees that Moshuch is only the Rabbanon. And a cut in the past, the time is Ma'atayim. What's the argument by day by night? They're arguing about the wording in the pasuk, nothing to do whether it's a mitzvah the Torah Rabbanon. This argument, it says now, even though maybe they're not done Shabbos, but it says and. So what do you mean and? What are we adding on? That was one that says you're adding on even, let's say, a Moshuch and all these other ones. We're adding on that they have to do by day, and the other ones are Masav the Shidduch. The brother holds you don't dashin ubayim. And therefore, if it's over, past 8 days, a child, even though Mahatori, you have to circumcise, can be done by night as well. And surely a Moshuch from the Rabbanon can be done by night. Says the Gemara, a very interesting thing. The Yosef, Rabbi Yechon was sitting in Israel, the Kaddish, and he was darshaning the following. Nois, if you have leftover 2 days went by in a night for Karma Shlamim, and now it's left over, so you have to burn it the following morning. This is by Nois, it says Viha Nois. The pasuk says, and the Nois. So he says, if it's the day that you have to burn it, it should be done during the day. What happens? For whatever reason, he didn't burn on the right time, and now it's beyond that. Nisif bein b'yayim bein b'layla. Rabbi Yechon says, once you're past that day, but you have to burn it, then you can burn it by day, by night, and so on. The eighth Rabbi Elazar, he had a student called Rabbi Elazar, just like we have Rabbi Yehuda, who's always said the name of Rav and always said the name of Shmuel. He was a favorite student. So too, we had a student, Rabbi Elazar to Rabbi Yechon. We did learn once Rabbi Elazar was a bubble for a while, but he was a student of Rabbi Yechon. And so Rabbi Elazar asked Rabbi Yechonon, "Ainli elanimo lishmini." He said, "What are you talking about? You're telling me because it's past the day that it can be done by day by night? No, look at bris milah. Look at ainli elanimo lishmini. It says only if it's circumcised the 8th day. Ainli melabiyim that can be done by day. What about, let's say the child was born bein hashmoshes of Shabbos? If it's twilight and we don't know if that's day or night. If it's born on Shabbos, then you're circumcised on Shabbos. But if it's born on Friday, you're not allowed to circumcise on Shabbos because you're not going to do it on Friday because you don't know for sure. But you can't do it on Shabbos either because it's not doiche Shabbos. If it's not 100%, that's the day that you have to mala. If it's labors mana, if it's past the 8th day, you don't circumcise on Shabbos. So therefore, what you do is you circumcise on Sunday, which is the 9th day. Or last Sunday, Friday was the Yom Tov, was born Thursday night ben Hashmoshes. You got to wait till Sunday. Or what do you call it? All of these days. If let's say the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah fall out. If 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, so yes, the first case is if it was for Soy Shabbos, Bein Hashmoshes. Maybe it was born on Shabbos, maybe born on Sundays. You got to wait till Sunday, which is 9 days. Friday night, you got to wait till Sunday, which is 10 days. If Yom Tov falls down on Sunday and it was born on Friday night, you got to wait till Mondays, it's 11 days. And if it's 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, you got to wait till Tuesday. So it's 12 days. Hainu still by day time. So we see that U tells you that by day. So over here it says the Hanois, which also means no matter what, even 10 days later, you have to burn it by day. That's Rabbi Lazar asked Rabbi Yechon. Even though we had a few days ago that not everyone dashes Vav, Rabbi Shmuel argues Rabbi Akiva. But Vav Hey Dodish by Noisa, it's not just Vav. It says Veha, a Vav and a Hey, both are extra. Everyone agrees you dashin. Ishtik. Rabbi Yechon was quiet. Boss of the Nofik, he didn't answer. Boss of the Nofik, after was walked out, made a comment to Shlakish. This is Rabbi Lazar ben Pedas. She Yoshev V'Doidish is sitting there and dashing. It's unbelievable how he was dashing like Moshe from the Eibishter. He was talking like a Tan in the Mishnah. Now it's not clear whether he was being it was like a derogatory comment or he was actually complimenting him. But either way, he said that Rabbi Lazar ben Pedas is talking like a Tana. He's talking psukim and everything else, but he's only an Amayra. In the Mishnah, whenever we have Rabbi Lazar, we have Rabbi Lazar of Shimon who would say his full name. If it's Tam Rabbi Lazar, it's Rabbi Lazar ben Shemora, not Rabbi Lazar ben Pedas. So he's saying that this Rabbi Lazar, he spoke like he is an authority himself. Doesn't bring any sources or anything else. Shlaki said to Rabbi Yechon, you think he made it up? Masniti, it's in Fesha Braisa. I never saw this brayso. What does it say? So Rabbi Yechon answered, but Toidas Koinim, which is a collection of braysos on Chumash Vayikra, which obviously Rabbi Yechon did not learn. Nofik Rabbi Yechon went out. Tanya betlasa yemi. He learned the entire Toidas Koinim in 3 days. The Savra betlasa yachid. Then he relearned it, and he analyzed it properly. It took him 3 months till finally he comprehended it totally from beginning to end. That's the story there. So the Gemara says that you see clearly from here they're not arguing whether by milim hatreim rabbanon, they're arguing whether we darshan the darshan above and say that they're included by ubayim hashmid imas halos, that everything has to be done by day or can be done by day and by night. Nothing to Rabbi Huna said that nothing to Rabbi Huna. Saying about further, yesterday we learned that an odol can, even though he's not circumcised, can be sprinkled on the 8th of Paradum, like we brought it out from Eden when they came to Israel. On the 10th day, they were sprinkled, because on the 14th day, they had to get the next one, the 3rd and the 7th. And then they brought the Korban Pesach, but they didn't circumcise themselves on that day, the 10th day, because they just arrived. They circumcised on the 11th day. So we see from there that an odol can receive that sprinkling. The same, now we're going to talk about whether an odol can do the spraying. Odol, shehiza, if an odol did the spraying, has a osik shade, his hazah is kosher. Why? Have it. He could, just like we remember somebody who went to, who was Truma, wait till before he can go ahead. And we say that if he touches Truma during the day, he's a sheni, and it doesn't affect other things, but it affects Truma that it becomes a shlishi. So and if you remember, we went out of our way to make sure that Tful does make the paraduma to disprove that tzdukim. So it says over here, we'll learn that it's also in Truma, yet kosher the para is allowed to make the para. Not only allowed to, we make sure that a Tvul Yom makes the para. So the same thing over here in Arul. The Arul is disqualified from eating Truma, and yet the Arul is what? Can go ahead and spray. Says the Gemara, what are you comparing it to? Malat Tvul Yom, maybe I could argue, you know why Tvul Yom came with the Meiser. A Tvul Yom is permitted in eating Meiser Sheni. We'll see later, and Arul is not. So therefore, and perhaps an Arul is not. So therefore, because the Tvul Yom is lenient by Meiser, maybe Tvul Yom can spray Paraduma, but an Arul is not. Says the Gemara, Otu anan la'achila kamrin. You think we're talking about eating? You're going to tell me that an odol cannot eat ma'isa, Tvul Yom can eat ma'isa, and therefore Tvul Yom can do the spraying. We're not talking about eating. We're talking about touching. Anan l'negia kamrin. Our kalvachema was regarding touching, because nobody eats the paraduma. What are you doing with the paraduma? You're touching it. You're handling it, and then you're spraying it. So he says over here, and so an odol is also allowed to touch ma'isa. There's no leniency in Tvul Yom over Odol. What do you tell me? Tvul Yom can touch Maisa? An Odol can touch Maisa. Odol's not Tamei. An Odol can touch Maisa. An Odol's allowed to touch any touch. He's not a Tamei person. So therefore, this is what we said. Tvul Yom Tvul Yom now touch Truma because he's a sheni Truma. He touches Truma, becomes possible, becomes a shlishi. Mutter b'poda, he's allowed to go ahead and handle poda. Odol shemutter b'negia. An Odol is allowed to touch Truma. Ein adin shemutter b'poda. An Odol can spray the poda aduma. So the Gemara Tanya actually the Bryce Odol Shehizev Odol and sprays has a osik shade. It is kosher. Umaisa hoy attack it happened. If Shiru Chachamim has a osik, they said the kohen who was an Odol didn't circumcise. So what? It has no impact. There's no bearing on his spraying other people. Makes a question. It says the Bryce tumtum a tumtum shekidish. But tumtum goes ahead and he mixes the water and the ashes of the paraduma. Kiddushe puzzle. He is puzzle. Why is he puzzled? The tumtum might be a male and he didn't circumcise. So we see clearly from here that when it comes to mixing the sand and the egg for the ashes and the mechatas, that if you are uncircumcised, he cannot do that. In other words, an odol cannot be involved with the paraduma, as we'll come back to soon. And it says here that an odol and puzzle kaddish. So tumtum is a suffix, cannot get involved because an avade odol is puzzle kaddish. What about an Adreginus has both signs, but he did circumcise himself. Then Kiddush kosher. If he did it, Kiddush kosher is all right because a woman also can make a difference. Woman, man makes a difference. So as long as they're circumcised, that's the opinion of the first Fari Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda says no. I hold that Andreginus also is not good because if he's a woman cannot do the paraduma. She Kiddush psul, they should suffer Isha psul. He holds. So they're arguing whether Isha can go ahead and do the paraduma or not. But as far as an odol is concerned, it seems from here that an odol is not allowed to be involved in the paraduma. So how can you say before that an odol is, Rabbi Loza said that an odol who sprays, it's all right. And he even told us a story that it happened and then everybody says it's all right. So our question is, it says, however, odol, the suffix odol, possible with a kaddish, they can't. And the suffix odol is a tumtum. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef, it's actually machlekes tanoim. So therefore, you can't ask a question from one b'rais and the other. One b'rais follows that an odol could spray, no one hold that. Hi, Tavat Rabbi Kiva. This follows Rabbi Kiva. The marbelela odol kitam. Where did we learn yesterday? According to Rabbi Kiva, that an odol cannot eat truma because it says ish and talks about the tamei. So he compares an odol to a tamei, and therefore, because he compares an odol to a tamei, that's why he cannot be involved. Tamei person cannot be involved in the paraduma. So an odol can't either be involved in the paraduma. On the other hand, the ones that the way we learn the other way has nothing to do with ish. Then an odol could be involved. Odol has nothing to do with tummy, and when odol has nothing to do with tummy, it could be involved in the paradum. Says the Gemara. The other way was with Toishiv and Sachar. Says the Gemara. Amar Rabbi says Rabbi Yasib Kamed Rabbi Yosef. I was sitting for Rabbi Yosef when he gave us this answer. We asked him a question. How can we not find any authority in any Bryce or Mishnah that says ha'odol v'hatame? Let a Bryce put a bunch of them together. If you're telling me an odol and tummy exactly the same thing, why don't we find a Bryce or a Mishnah somewhere that says odol and tummy? And we'll say, the author of that is Rabbi Kiva. If you remember the beginning of Megillah, all the Mishnayos are from the students of Rabbi Kiva, a little bit of Rabbi Kiva. So why don't we find any Mishnah or Bryce putting the two together? Says, what do you mean? What do you mean? We find in Chagiga we had Baktani. It says Chagiga ha'odol ve'hatame apatim minariya. They're exempt from going to Oile Regel, and so it says clearly we bunch them together. And the Gemara the Taka says it follows Rabbi Kiva. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Rava did not understand that Mishnah has anything to do with Rabbi Kiva. He understood the problem there is that the reason why in odol you're going to present yourself for Hashem. He said they should be model themselves. How can you present yourself for Hashem? I say with tummy. In other words, it's undignified to stand before the Eibishter and display the Eibishter that you're not Gemalit or that you're tummy. Nothing to do with Rabbi Akiva that the status of an odol is the same as a tummy. Hashem Shalomah, it's mis. But odol tamayu, and they're consistent. So the Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan that argue before regarding. So we're digressing. You Rabbanan who argue for about Adreginus. In other words, a suffix isha, whether they can do the chatas or not, the paradum or not. They're arguing consistent of you. Time we learned hakol shein lekadish. Everyone can be kosher lekadish to do the mechata, to do the paradum. Makes a difference. Isha. The only ones that are accepted are chutz mechedish advokat. Except those three, they're not. They can't. Rabbi Yehuda says are excluded. However, Rabbi Yehuda's machshe bekotten, he says no, because we have one word that's inclusive, one exclusive. He says no. I say cotton is all right. The price will be isha. He says that isha is no good. Disqualified from paradum. So, and that's the machlekes here. Uvandregen is my time the Rabbanon. What's the sword of the Rabbanon? Why by Andregen say it's all right? The Ksiv, it says, because it says, that they should take La Tomei, they should take to the Talmudic person offer say for the chatas from the ashes of the burning of the chatas, and then they put on it benos. It says the pasuk benos all of mayim chaim they put water on top of it in the keli, top of the ashes. So because it's a continuation, first it says that they should gather together, and then it says that they should then go ahead and do this. So I would say haner the pasuk ba'asifa pasuk makida. Wherever we disqualified, it says the pasuk about asaf ish, so we say ish and not a chedesh v'katan. And then it says Torah comes to include, so we include Ish as well. And so there's a Hana the Kshem, so anyone who's kosher to gather together the Ashes Kshem Kiddush, they can go ahead and they can mix it up. And therefore, and the Regan is a kosher, because whether it's the Ish, whether the Ish, as long as it's Gemalit, he's all right. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I say the other way around. Im Kain, if you are right, whoever is kosher in the Asif is kosher in the Zrika, then tell me in Kain. If so, name Makra, the Pasuk should have said the Lokach, the same person that gathered together, or so just say the Lokach. And what that they took my Lokchoi. Why did it say in plural Lokchoi? No, but you're expanding. You start the previous part of asaf, the single, and now suddenly you're expanding it to plural. Why? You're trying to say that more people are included, even those who were not included first pasuk. So isha nami. So why don't we include isha as well? Because it says in the pasuk the nosan all of mayim chaim kelly, and because it's written the nosan in masculine, therefore we say v'loy nosan. But Abban, what are they going to answer? How are they going to respond? You're right. You know why it doesn't say the lokach v'nosan single like it before asaf? Because how many would have thought shakal chad the yoyiv chad? I would have thought that according to places there, the same person that mixes the ash and everything else has to be the same person that sprays it, does everything else, and we want to show that to different people. Therefore, we changed it from singular to plural. Because the mother says v'lakhu, and if it would have said v'lakhu v'nasnu, I mean, I would have thought the shakli the same two people who did this must do that. Because v'lakhu v'nasan, it says v'lakhu plural and v'nasan to tell you. Since you thought of two and came one, so obviously it doesn't have to be the same people. It doesn't have to be the same people at all. It's two different jobs, and whatever job he was done was they were done. Now, feel the shakli today be and even two and then one. So what do we? So therefore, we have a machlekes as to whether Andreginus can or Nisha can or cannot be involved in the paradum. We'll stop here. We'll continue tomorrow.